When the twilight is gone, and no songbirds are singing,
The underlying story of Twin Peaks is the struggle of good versus evil, and these two forces are represented by the fireman and Judy in The Return. The fireman is, of course, the gentle giant from the original television series and is a benevolent force of good. Judy, known as Judy, is an idea introduced by Philip Jeffries in the prequel film Fire Walk With Me.
I'm not going to talk about Judy.
And is inferred as the mother of all evil. This conflict is, in fact, the buried or hidden narrative that drives The Return. Judy is represented throughout the story in several forms, seen most clearly as the hovering demon, the experiment in New York, the white horse, and the icon that appears on Mr. C's playing card and Hawk's map. In all probability, she is also the mother creature in pursuit of Cooper during his escape. After her emergence in New York, she heads to Twin Peaks and resides inside Sarah Palmer, Laura's mother, feeding on her constant supply of pain and sorrow. The splitting of the atom in 1945 causes Judy to unleash Bob and other evils upon the world. These evil forces manifest in a location known as the convenience store, materialize years later, and are seen as the Woodsman. The fireman is alerted to the rift and witnesses the birth of Bob. He then creates Laura Palmer, a golden orb of concentrated energy meant to one day counter Bob's evil and possibly Judy's as well.
Listen to the sounds.
25 years later, veiled clues reveal that the fireman, Agent Cooper, and Laura Palmer have a plan to rid the world of Judy. Based on these clues and context, an argument could be made that their plan goes something like this. Cooper will rescue Laura from the past, and the fireman will create a trap world and place her there. Then Cooper and Diane will lure Judy into the trap, and Laura will destroy her with her concentrated energy. More hints of a plan come from Gordon Cole.
Before he disappeared, Major Briggs shared with me and Cooper his discovery of an entity, an extreme negative force called in olden times Judy.
This means that Judy was discussed by Gordon, Cooper, and Briggs off-screen in the original series back in 1989.
Major Briggs, Cooper, and I put together a plan that could lead us to Judy. Philip Jeffries, who doesn't really exist anymore, told me a long time ago he was onto this entity.
Jeffries also knew about Judy in 1989 and could now be involved with the hunt for her as well.
Now, the last thing Cooper told me, if I disappear, do everything you can to find me. I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone.
If this was Cooper's plan 25 years ago, then he and the firemen are now on the same page.
I understand. Why didn't you want to talk about Judy? Who is Judy?
There are three interconnected subplots of The Return, including Cooper's odyssey as Dougie Jones, the events in the town of Twin Peaks, and arguably the most potent, Mr. C versus Judy. Mr. C has been reaping havoc all over the globe for the past 25 years, climbing to the top of the criminal underworld and feeding on the spoils with the parasite Bob. But it's not enough for him, he wants more. And like Cooper and the fireman's secret plan, Mr. C's goal is also to capture or destroy Judy, possibly to harness her power or to become the #1 bad guy.
I want.
Meanwhile, Judy has taken up residence in the Palmer house, inhabiting Sarah Palmer while she watches scenes of violence on television and consumes endless amounts of cigarettes and alcohol. The big reveal comes when we see the entity inside of Sarah before she tears the throat out of a trucker who antagonizes her. Mr. C spends most of his time looking for coordinates to various backdoors and portals to get to Judy. Judy, however, is onto him and they are playing a cat and mouse game. Mr. C is revealed to be the billionaire behind the Glassbox experiment, a makeshift portal through which Judy appears and escapes. And it's very probable that the radio transmission he receives at the motel is actually Judy and not Philip Jeffries.
I missed you in New York. I just called to say goodbye. You are going back in tomorrow, and I will be with Bob again.
We could also speculate that one or more of Mr. C's coordinates actually come from Judy, and the portal that annihilates Richard Horne is actually a trap meant for Mr. C. His plan is ultimately thwarted by the fireman and Major Briggs, and the goal of catching Judy is thankfully never fulfilled.
This is where you'll find Judy. Cooper, remember.
In the finale of The Return, before sending Cooper back in time, Philip Jeffries acknowledges that he is, in fact, assisting in the plan to trap Judy as well. Cooper rescues Laura in the past, and in the present we see Sarah Palmer having a violent reaction and attempting to smash Laura's picture over and over again. The picture remains undamaged, symbolizing that Laura is safe and that this house of misery is no longer the source of so much pain and sorrow that Judy needs. With Mr. C destroyed and Laura now in the trap, the final stages of Cooper and the firemen's plan are ready for execution. This is also where the story of the return seems to completely fall apart for some viewers. At this point, we are solely relying on the firemen's clues and a small amount of context to discern what is actually happening and how the return concludes. Cooper and Diane cross over into the trap world and drive to a motel. What follows is a real-time, awkward, and joyless sex scene that is quite painful to watch. Neither person is enjoying themselves, and one wonders what Diane is going through, considering she was raped and probably killed by the evil version of the same man. However, the sex they are performing is a necessary ritual to lure Judy into the trap. There are several clues that support this theory. For one, we remember that Sam and Tracy are having sex when Judy appears in the glass box in New York, leaning toward the idea that the force of Judy is attractive to sex. And it's worth noting that the sex scene between Tracy and Sam happens around the same time from the start of the return, as Cooper and Diane's sex scene happens from the end, mirrored images if you will. Also, we hear the song My Prayer by the Platters, which is a callback to the radio station sequence when Judy's evil and the woodsman permeate the airwaves and materialize in our world. Finally, we can look to the Mark Frost book, The Secret History of Twin Peaks, to add more context to this theory. In the book, the character of Jack Parsons is found to have been a student of Aleister Crowley, whose mystical system of Thelema uses sex magic rituals in an attempt to conjure the mother of all abominations, also known as the Whore of Babylon in the Christian Bible. The ritual is complete, Diane disappears, and Cooper leaves the motel the next morning. We instantly see that the world has slightly changed around him, including the motel and Cooper's car. Cooper arrives in Odessa, Texas at a coffee shop named Judy's. The changing world and the coffee shop are indicators that Judy is here. Arriving at the address given to him, Cooper notices a familiar electrical pylon with the number 6 on it. This pylon has appeared throughout the Twin Peaks series and is also seen by Andy when he encounters the firemen, reminding us that this world has been created for a purpose. Cooper knocks at the door and someone looking like Laura Palmer emerges.
What's your name?
She is insistent that her name is Carrie Page, and while she seems a little rattled when he first mentions Laura Palmer and that her mother's name is Sarah, he convinces her to go to her mother's home in Twin Peaks, Washington. Before they leave, Cooper enters her home and notices a dead man resembling Bob, and he also sees a dark saucer and a small white horse statue on a shelf.
The horse is the white of the eyes.
They make it to Twin Peaks and Carrie doesn't recognize anything even when they arrive at her childhood home. Cooper takes her hand as they walk up the steps and knock on the door. A woman answers and he asks for Sarah Palmer.
No, there's no one here by that name.
She claims to own the house, and when Cooper asks who she bought it from, she asks someone off camera and replies,
Chalfont, Mrs. Chalfont.
What is your name?
Alice Tremond.
We now have the final clues that point to Judy being inside the house and that this is all a facade. The first clue is Alice Tremond's subtle lean off screen to ask an unseen person the answers to Cooper's questions. It seems innocent enough, but a cynical take is that there is literally someone or something telling her what to say. It can also be a callback to when Hawk visits Sarah Palmer and we hear noises off screen, letting us know that perhaps something else is in there with her. The final clues are in the names Tremond and Chalfont. Mrs. Tremond was the old woman who lived with her grandson and was visited by Donna Hayward while looking for clues into Laura's death in the original series. Donna takes Agent Cooper to her apartment to ask her some questions, and the woman who answers the door is not the same Mrs. Tremond. In the prequel film, Laura is given a picture by the old woman and the grandson, who are referred to in the prequel as the Chalfonts.
Can you tell me whose trailer it was?
An old woman and her grandson, Chalfont.
Laura also sees them in a vision of the convenience store, pointing to the idea that they are supernatural and probably evil, and that Tremond and Chalfont are aliases used to disguise themselves in the real world. One could also make the assumption that maybe this old woman was the Judy of the original story, the grandmother or mother of these evil beings. Cooper fails to recall this minor detail, maybe because he is slowly forgetting himself like Carrie Page in this world. Keeping his composure but devastated by his failure, he apologizes and slowly walks with Carrie back down the steps and into the street. Carrie looks back at the house, staring intently. Cooper staggers while in deep thought, refusing to give up, and is desperately trying to understand what went wrong and why the plan has failed. He wonders aloud,
What year is this?
which triggers something in Carrie Page. She looks back at the Palmer house with a new wide-eyed terror. In the faint background, Carrie Page hears the distorted voice of her mother, Sarah Palmer, calling her name. It all comes back to her. She is Laura Palmer, and this is Judy's house now. From the deepest depths of her soul, Laura releases her famous blood-curdling scream. Cooper looks back in shock as a flash of electricity burns out the lights in the Palmer house, and the scream echoes into infinity. Laura's concentrated energy has been released, destroying Judy and this reality with it.
My prayer and the answer you give, may they still be the same.